Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where powerful moments of transformation and human connection come to life. Today, we bring you a heartwarming tale about a former teacher and her former student, whose paths cross unexpectedly years later. Join us as we explore how one person's belief can change the trajectory of a life forever. Ethan Carter had everything a man could ask for. A towering empire built from his ambition, countless accolades, and wealth that seemed endless. As the CEO of Carter Innovations, a leading tech company known for its groundbreaking software, he had it all. Yet, amid the luxury of his penthouse apartments and private jets, something always seemed missing. The glimmer of success often felt hollow, like a beautiful picture frame with nothing inside. One crisp evening, as the holiday lights of the city twinkled below him, Ethan decided to break away from the routine of business meetings and corporate events. He had become weary of the constant cycle of the high society gatherings and the constant stream of people fawning over his success. Ethan longed for something real, something he could not buy with money. He yearned for simplicity, a taste of normalcy that would take him away from the artificiality of his world. His choice that evening was unexpected, an unassuming little restaurant tucked between two high-rise buildings in the heart of the city. It wasn't the kind of place a billionaire CEO would typically dine at. There were no extravagant chandeliers or lavish decor, just a humble ambience that welcomed you with the smell of freshly baked bread and sizzling dishes. But it was that very simplicity that drew Ethan in. As he pushed open the door, the warmth inside greeted him, a stark contrast to the chill of the winter air. The low hum of jazz music drifted through the room, blending seamlessly with the sounds of clinking glasses and murmurs of conversation. He asked for a table in the corner, away from the bustling crowd. He needed to clear his mind, even if only for a moment. As he sat there, gazing around the room, Ethan tried to relax, his thoughts drifting to the pressure of his role at the top of his company. But despite the bustling energy around him, he felt more detached than ever before, like a visitor in a world that didn't quite belong to him. The waitress who approached his table was efficient but polite, her presence a calming contrast to the high-octane world Ethan was used to. She was carrying a tray of dishes, her movements swift and graceful as she navigated through the tables. He couldn't help but notice something about her. Something familiar. She had an air of kindness, an aura that seemed to pull at his memory. But he couldn't place it. He shook it off as a passing thought. When she finally arrived at his table with his meal, his breath caught in his throat. "Here's your order, sir," she said, her voice soft but professional. The moment she spoke, everything inside him seemed to freeze. He looked up at her, trying to calm his racing thoughts. There was something about her voice, something about the way she carried herself, it all felt too familiar. Ethan couldn't explain why, but he knew, deep down, that he had seen this woman before. "Thank you," he murmured, though his voice felt distant. As she moved on to the next table, Ethan sat there, staring at his plate, the food before him forgotten. His mind was racing, trying to piece together the fragments of memory that felt like they were just on the edge of his consciousness. It wasn't just her face, no, it was the way she spoke, the way she moved. There was a connection, a thread that tied her to his past. He had to know who she was. After a few moments of mental confusion, he raised his hand, signaling for her. She approached cautiously, her eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and professional restraint. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his mind. "Is everything okay with your meal, sir?" she asked. Ethan hesitated for a moment. This was it. He couldn't let the moment slip away without at least trying. His heart pounded as he asked, Can I ask you something personal? The waitress blinked, a hint of surprise in her eyes. Personal, she repeated. Sure. I guess, she added, her voice gentle. What's your name? Ethan asked, leaning slightly closer, unable to tear his gaze from her. Grace, she replied. Grace Mitchell. The name hit Ethan like a wave crashing against rocks. It confirmed what he had been suspecting all along. This was the woman, the teacher who had changed his life forever. But now, seeing her here in this modest restaurant, as a waitress, felt like a punch to his gut. What had happened to her? Where had life taken her? The woman who had once been his guiding light seemed so far removed from the figure he remembered. The teacher who had always believed in him. Despite everything. Grace Mitchell, he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. You were my teacher at Maplewood Elementary. For a moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. Then, as recognition dawned on her, Grace's eyes widened, and her hand flew to her mouth. Logan, little Logan, she whispered. It was him. And as she stared at him, the years melted away. She recognized him, the quiet boy who had struggled with his studies. The boy who needed encouragement. The boy who had been lost in a world that seemed too big for him. Ethan's smile was soft, tinged with bittersweet emotion. It's really me, he said, his voice full of warmth. I'm not so little anymore. Grace sat down, overcome by the shock of seeing the boy she once mentored standing before her as the man he had become. Her heart was full of memories. Of the shy boy who had needed encouragement just to believe in himself. And now, here he was. Successful beyond anything she had imagined for him. But there was a question that lingered. A question that made Ethan's chest tighten as he asked softly. What happened to you? Grace? I thought you loved teaching. Why are you working here? Sarah Mitchell had always been a dreamer. Her heart full of ambition and a desire to make a difference. From a young age, she had known her calling was in education. Helping children unlock their potential and guiding them toward brighter futures. She had poured her soul into teaching, believing that every child, no matter their background, deserved the opportunity to succeed. It was a passion that ran deep within her. And for years, it had fueled her dedication to her students at Maplewood Elementary. When Ethan Carter had entered her 5th grade class, she saw more than just a shy boy struggling with academics. She saw potential, raw and untapped, buried beneath layers of self-doubt. It was in him that Sarah saw the opportunity to make the greatest impact. He was intelligent but lacked the confidence to trust in his own abilities. She had always believed in him, often staying late after school to offer extra help, and encouraging him to push through his challenges. Those long afternoons spent helping him with his math problems had built a bond. One of trust and admiration that would change both their lives in unexpected ways. But Sarah's life, like Ethan's, was not without its challenges. The school district's funding had been slashed year after year. And while the pressure mounted, Sarah continued to fight for her students. She remained hopeful, clinging to the belief that teaching was more than a job, it was a calling. A way to change the world. One child at a time. But as the years wore on, that hope began to fade. The bureaucracy, the constant cutbacks, the growing number of students with fewer resources, it all weighed heavily on her. And then, the final blow came, the school district had to lay off staff. And Sarah was among those let go. It was a devastating blow. One she hadn't seen coming. The very thing she had poured her heart and soul into was taken from her. And she was left adrift, questioning everything she had worked for. Without teaching, Sarah found herself struggling to make ends meet. Her savings quickly dwindled, and the bills piled up. She had always been proud of her independence, but now she found herself in a position where she needed to start over. After a long search, she found herself working at a local restaurant, doing everything she could to survive. It was a far cry from the classroom she had loved, but it was a job, and it kept food on the table. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, but it was the life she had to live. In the restaurant, Sarah quickly fell into a routine. She learned how to navigate the world of food service, how to smile and be kind to customers, even when her heart wasn't in it. She met new people, each with their own story, and for a while, she allowed herself to settle into the comfort of anonymity. She didn't expect anything beyond getting through each day. It was a quiet life, one that allowed her to blend in, to remain unnoticed. But then, one evening, everything changed. The moment she saw Ethan again, her heart skipped a beat. He had walked into the restaurant with an air of familiarity. His tall frame and confident stride a stark contrast to the shy boy she had once known. As their eyes met, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't seen him in years. And yet, here he was, sitting in front of her as a successful billionaire. The boy she had once believed in, the one she had fought for, had made it. He had become someone important. But as she looked at him, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. She had helped shape his future, but she had lost her own. She was no longer the teacher who could make a difference, the person who could inspire. Instead, she was just another waitress in a crowded restaurant, forgotten by the very world she had once helped shape. It was as though the years had blurred everything, her dreams, her purpose, and now, as Ethan sat before her, all she could see was the distance between them. The gap between the boy she had once mentored and the man sitting across from her. A man who had achieved more than she had ever imagined. And yet, something about that encounter stirred something deep inside her. A realization. A sense that maybe, just maybe, her journey wasn't over. That there was still time to make a difference. Not just for others, but for herself too. As she stood there, facing Ethan, she felt the weight of their shared history. But she also felt something else, hope. A faint but growing hope that maybe her story wasn't finished. And with that, Sarah Mitchell's life, once on hold, began to shift, as she found herself standing at a crossroads once again. Unsure of what the future would bring but ready to face it, no matter the cost. Ethan Carter had changed. That much was clear from the moment Sarah had seen him across the restaurant. The shy, insecure boy she had once worked tirelessly to encourage had become a confident, successful man. But as he sat there in front of her, something more profound than mere recognition began to unfold. There was a sense of connection between them, one that Sarah hadn't felt in years. In a strange way, their paths had intersected again, though under completely different circumstances. It was the kind of moment that made Sarah realize just how much time had passed, and how far she had fallen from the woman she once was. Sarah's mind raced as she watched Ethan order his meal. His demeanor relaxed, easy in a way she hadn't seen him back in school. She knew this moment was significant. But what did it mean? Was it fate that had led him to this restaurant? Or was it something deeper? And what did he think of her now, his former teacher? The one who had believed in him when no one else did? Was he aware of the impact she had made on his life? It wasn't long before Ethan returned her gaze. A flicker of recognition in his eyes. A polite smile formed on his lips as he casually spoke. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that he, too, felt the weight of the moment. When he finally spoke her name, it hit her harder than she expected. The sound of her old name, Ms. Mitchell, spoken by him, brought memories flooding back. The late-night tutoring sessions, the encouragement during parent-teacher meetings, the hope she had poured into that shy boy who once doubted himself. She had always known that Ethan had potential, but never in her wildest dreams had she thought he would become a billionaire. But as they exchanged pleasantries, a strange warmth enveloped Sarah. She had spent so many years working tirelessly, first as a teacher, then as a waitress, convinced that her best years were behind her. Seeing Ethan now, however, reignited something inside her. She wasn't just Sarah Mitchell the teacher anymore, or Sarah Mitchell the waitress. She was more than the sum of her past failures. She had made a difference in his life, and now he was standing before her, a living testament to her belief that she could inspire greatness. As they talked, Sarah learned that Ethan hadn't forgotten her. In fact, he had always remembered how much she had done for him. His success, he confessed, was built on the foundation of her encouragement. He attributed much of his drive to her belief in him during his most uncertain years. Her heart swelled with a mix of pride and sadness. She hadn't expected that her small, seemingly insignificant acts would have such a lasting impact on his life. And yet, there he was, sitting across from her. A success story, a success that she had helped create, despite the years that had passed and the differences in their lives. There was a quiet, unspoken understanding between them. As their conversation continued, Sarah realized just how much her own life had changed. The woman she was now wasn't the person she had been when she first met Ethan. Her journey had taken unexpected turns. And yet, it was clear that the choices she had made, however difficult, had led her to this very moment. A moment where she could reflect on her past with gratitude and look forward to a future filled with new possibilities. As Ethan spoke of his company, his ventures, and his plans for the future, Sarah found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. She had been stuck in a place of frustration, feeling that her dreams had withered. But now, in his presence, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Maybe it wasn't too late for her. Maybe she could still make a difference. Not just for others, but for herself too. Ethan's success was a reminder that sometimes the greatest things come from the most unexpected places. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was time for her to create her own success story. One of reinvention, hope, and the courage to take risks again. As the evening wore on, Ethan offered her an opportunity, something she never could have imagined. He wanted her to work with him, to help mentor others, to give back to those who, like him, had been overlooked. It was a chance for Sarah to step back into the world of education and inspiration, a world that had always felt like home. Ethan had made it clear the world was full of untapped potential, and he believed she still had so much to offer. Sarah stood at the crossroads of a new beginning. With Ethan by her side, she felt the spark of hope rekindling within her. She had never imagined this day would come. She had never imagined that a former student would offer her the chance to find her voice again. But here it was, a life transformed. And as she walked out of that quiet restaurant with Ethan, her heart was full of anticipation. The road ahead was uncertain. But for the first time in years, she was ready to face it head on. Thank you for watching this moving story of resilience, second chances, and the lasting impact of kindness. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Empathy Stories for more tales that inspire and remind us of the power of human connection.